This is 5C. Certainly not under my watch. It's not going to happen.
So the buzzword in town is zig, and some are saying that there's a zigzag to the banks as the banks struggle to provide or to cross over to the new currency that was announced last Friday by the new governor, John Mshayavan. Now, on this, the Free Talk, we discussed this new currency, its implications, and what for the economy. Now, on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom, are your host, always opens the door to answering the serious questions. So what? So join me after this break as we discuss. Is it a zigzag or is the zig that will get us through our economic problems? Welcome back to this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom. I, your host as usual, Dara B. Now, joining me in studio this evening to discuss the zig, the money, the people, Zimbabwean politics, is none other than the former Minister of Finance, Tendai Biti. Thank you very much, Honorable, for joining me.
Good evening, Dara.
Beautiful. Now, Honorable, you're a former Minister of Finance, so maybe before we get into the questions that I have for you, just your brief analysis of the monetary policy that was announced by the new governor, John Mshayavan.
I think the poor man has walked into a jungle, a labyrinth that he half understands. He's been set up for failure. I think he should have stood his ground against the introduction of the fiction called Zig. But he had no choice about it. We know that the government had announced its introduction long before he was appointed. And so the new currency sets him up for failure. It's a currency that is supposed to be anchored by gold. It's a currency that is supposed to be anchored by reserves, but we don't have, the reserves. So it's a myth. It's a fiction, and all it will achieve is further confusion and deceleration of this economy.
Yeah, but you say that he had no choice, but Governor Mshayavan, John II, was clear that not under his watch, he was not going to be pushed. I mean, I think he said this more than 13 times in his speech. On the first instance, he said that not under his watch is he going to allow the printing of money. He also said not under his watch will he allow people's money to be stolen. Now, you are saying he has no choice, a man who has declared boldly in front of the world that not under his watch.
Yeah, look, I admire his ambition, but unfortunately it's misplaced, and he's going to understand that it's a job laced and lacerated with a poison chalice, and if he's going to be principled, I don't see him lasting 5 years. He will resign before that. The people who print money are not found at 80 Samora Machel Avenue. the address of the central bank. The people who print money are at the 6th floor of new government complex, at the Ministry of Finance. It is the Ministry of Finance that can't live within its means. It is the Ministry of Finance that generates deficit after deficit. And it is the Ministry of Finance that will issue like confetti treasury bill after treasury bill that then gets imported to the to the Reserve Bank, that then gets transmitted to the Reserve Bank. So John's problem is the assumption that what Zimbabwe is facing is a monetary crisis. No, not at all. What the problem, the fundamental problem that Zimbabwe is facing remains structurally a fiscal crisis of lack of consolidation, a fiscal crisis of too much money chasing too few goods, a fiscal crisis of overaccumulation, a fiscal crisis of lack of fiscal consolidation, a government that can't live within its means. So you will discover that Guvamatanga, Mutulisi Ngube are a disaster and a complete disaster.
You said that money is printed at the Ministry of Finance. You at the Ministry of Finance, did you participate in this printing of money? That makes you say this boldly. That
absolutely not, because we ran a tight fiscal ship. We ran cash budgeting. So we waited to have cash before we spend it. So we redefined the rules. The motive, we eat what we kill, was structural. It was entrenched in our philosophy, and we didn't run any deficit at all. So unless you are able and capable of pursuing a zero deficit financing, you have a problem. And unfortunately, Mutuli has not been capable of doing that.
Mutuli has repeatedly, Minister of Finance has repeatedly said that we are having a surplus. And Dr. John Mshayawan, during his announcement of the monetary policy, actually spoke about over 100 billion, 100 million United States dollars that is a buffer, saying that this money is there and is being kept by the RBZ.
Yes, you raise an important aspect which I want to deal with on the lack of technical credibility of ZIG as a backed currency. If you're going to introduce a new currency, then you have the reserves to back it. Now, if you listened closely and read closely, they only have 1.1 tons of gold, whose total cost is 175 million US dollars. Then they have cash in the sum of US $100 million. I'm not quite sure that he actually has the cash physically. I suspect it could be the remainder of these SDRs that Zimbabwe got from the IMF 2 years ago. Remember, we got SDRs of almost $1 billion US. Nobody is talking about the same anymore. But knowing these guys as I do, they probably ate that money literally and metaphorically. But assuming he's correct that he has got $275 million, 175 million US dollars in the form of physical gold, 1.1 tons, and 100 million US dollars cash. Our imports are around $7 billion. $7 billion. So if you divide 275 into $7 billion, we actually have 11 days worth of import cover, just a mere 11 days. So there are no reserves, because reserves, remember, are there to back up your currency. So from a technical point of view, the currency is a fiction. From a technical point of view, the currency is a complete lie, which is why I said there is nothing structured about the structured currency that they've introduced in Statutory Instrument 60 of 2024, except structured dishonesty, structured mendacity, and structured insanity.
But you didn't address the issue that there's a government has a surplus.
The government doesn't have a surplus. Let me come to the surplus. The budget we had was a $58 trillion budget, you recall. Was a $58 trillion budget. It was when the budget was done, the exchange rate in November of last year was around 1:8,000. Before the end of the year, the exchange rate was already on 20,000. Right now, as I'm talking to you, up until Friday, in fact Wednesday, the exchange rate had already hit 1:40,000, meaning that they actually had been devaluation of the Zimbabwean dollar. Part of the thing that ZIG is actually doing, because if you go by the notes that they've issued, the exchange rate of the ZIG to the Zimbabwean dollar is around 1 ZIG to about 2,200 RTGS, which translates to about 1 ZIG to about $13. So what they've done, what John Part 2 is simply doing, is a zigzag, as we've called it. They've essentially, through the back door, removed the zeros in the same process that we saw between 2006 2008. But I want to come back to your surplus. We are actually in deficit finance. We are actually in overdraft. We did not generate money to cover the election of 2023. We did not generate enough money to cater for the huge climate shock that is coming out of the drought that is hitting Zimbabwe. That is why only last week on Thursday, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa, issued a statement in which he is asking for the international community the sum of $2 billion, because they are already in a deficit that is in excess of $500 million. The Public Accounts Committee should investigate the balance sheet of this government at the present moment, which is why, despite the fact that the Public Finance Management Act says you must close your books and produce monthly statements, you must close your books and produce your balance sheet for the previous statement by March. They haven't done that, and they will not do that for at least a year because the deficit is huge. Right now, as I'm talking to you, they are busy issuing treasury bills as confetti to cover for the fiscal deficit that this country is being arrested. As I'm talking to you, Namhla Kates.
But I said just a few weeks ago with Eddie Cross, an economist of Nord, and he spoke to me about how Zimbabwe is in a better position now. And he said that our GDP is at 50 billion United States dollars, and you're talking about deficit.
You know, I have no comment over Mr. Eddie Cross. I have no comment. I think he should have written fiction because he's prone to inelastic capacity to exaggerate and hyperbole. So he should write books of fiction. But he's an elderly man, so I will respect him. This economy is not a $50 billion economy. Look at the statistics produced by the World Bank. Look at the regional economic outlook produced by the IMF. This economy is not bigger than US $25 billion dollars. Just look at the poverty that is arresting our people. 79% of our people are living in extreme poverty, real extreme poverty. There are families that are going out there with 1 meal per day, 1 meal in 2 days. So if you say to my Ezra in Lotito, to my Duve in Cholocho, to my Chibanda in Chendambuya, that the GDP of this country is US $50 billion, which then makes per capita income of over 3,000, which means we've already achieved upper middle income status. It's a joke. This is an extremely a poor country, reflected by our balance sheet. Look at the state of our roads. We can't provide basic service in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of clean water. With great respect to the Democratic Republic of Congo, we are the pothole capital of sub-Saharan Africa. Our health system is malseated by primitive prehistoric diseases such as cholera and dysentery and so forth. This Dara is a failed state and a failed economy.
But Honorable Biti, you talk about this failed economy as if there's nothing that's happening in Zimbabwe. Haven't we seen industry opening, investors coming into this country? For instance, let us just talk about how our people are able to fund fast food consumption. You know, every single corner of our town has a Chicken Inn, has got a KFC, and there are huge queues there. If you go there, people are consuming.
Look, economists have got a term called marginal propensity to consume. So the marginal propensity to consume of the working people, of the people, what Prof. Collier calls people at the bottom billion, is much higher than the marginal propensity to consume of people that are sitting at the top of the pyramid. So if you take in let's say in Kwadzan, it makes more money than in Borodale because of the marginal propensity to consume. So the existence of and the implosion, if you like, of fast food outlets is a reflection of that poverty. It's a reflection of a higher marginal propensity to consume. I'm hungry. I'll get $3. I'll go and buy a wing and zingers at KFC. That's not the real economy, Dara. The real economy is factories. The real economy is manufacturing. The one area of the economy where rightly there is a lot of activity is the mining sector. But the mining sector has been malseated and drowned by extractive capital. They are coming into our country to grab our lithium. They're coming into our country to grab our platinum resources. Lithium right now is costing it around US $80,000 a ton, but the country has nothing to show for it. And the kind of capital we are having from Russia, from China, is so extractive that you find mountains being bought, you find graveyards being abused by capital that is no respect to the environment, by capital that is not value adding. There is no platinum refinery in this country. There is no lithium manufacturing factory in Zimbabwe, despite the fact that we are transmitting per month tons and tons of lithium. If you go to Forbes border post in Mutare right now, the trucks carrying our lithium into Mozambique are now snaking into Mutare town. The trucks sneaking our lithium into Mozambique are now snaking into the Vumba road, but we have nothing to show for it. So you will see investment, and you will see investment in fast foods and fuel outlets, because the demand, particularly for fuel, is inelastic. You have to ride a car to come to your office to do this interview. So whether you like it or not, you're going to find $10 to put in your car. The demand is inelastic. You probably had a cup of tea. So fast food, Bakers Inn has to provide the goods. But the real sector of the economy are not there. They're collapsed. You are putting on a nice suit here. A few years ago, we used to have David Whitehead, where you could buy world-class Van Huysen shirts. Now they are gone. So the actual productive sector of the economy has collapsed. In the past 10 years, since 2014, the economy has been growing on an average of 2%. Compare that with 2009, 2013, when in real terms, this economy grew. So we are not producing. That's why if you go into a supermarket, 80% of the goods you are seeing in the counters are actually manufactured out of Zimbabwe. I said our imports are around 7 billion US dollars. Much of that is food, much of that is drugs. The remainder are fuel and energy, electricity. So we are a small, crippled economy that has failed to take off because of two things. The pursuit of destructive politics, the failure of our democratic politics to change Zimbabwe, and secondly, accumulation, for the sake of accumulation.
But the International Monetary Fund has been singing a different tune from what you said. I mean, what makes you think that you are a better analyst on the Zimbabwean economy than a whole IMF?
As I'm talking to you right now, the IMF is in the country conducting an Article 4 consultation that they started in February and did not finish. So for the first time probably in their history, they have had to do an Article 4 consultation in installments because of the complexity, the confusion, and the imbalance and disequilibrium of this economy. Wait for their Article 4 consultation report if it ever comes out. But the one that was done 2 years ago, the government has refused its publication. In short, I don't need the IMF and the World Bank to tell me that this economy is a disaster. I only need to go to Pick and Pay and Spar over the corner there and to see the evidence. If a cost of mazoe that is manufactured here is costing $6 US, I don't need Washington to tell me that this economy is a failed economy. 95% of our people are unemployed. I was driving in town yesterday. You can't drive because of congestion caused by the implosion of the informal sector. Everyone is selling tomatoes, everyone is selling sneakers, everyone is selling a t-shirt. That's how our people have been reduced to pauperization, poverty, and living on the edges.
But yet the IMF in its statement says that economic activity in Zimbabwe continues to show resilience in the face of currency instability and high inflation. GDP growth is estimated at 5.3% in 2023.
That won't look. Even the Reserve Bank governor revised those figures in his statement.
Revised for 2024, not 2023. The IMF here is talking about the 2023 GDP. It talks of 5.3 and says the economic activity is showing resilience. Now, and these are people, an organization dedicated to looking at economies and economics. And do you think that your view is better than theirs?
You need to read the full report, Dara. If a patient is sick and he goes to the hospital, he's got cancer. The fact that he can raise his hand, the fact that he can actually eat is not a true reflection of the prognosis of that patient. If you read that report, it will tell you that the economic vitals of this country are in the intensive care unit. When you look at the economy like you look at a human being, if I look at you, if a medical doctor looks at you, you will measure your temperature, you will measure your blood pressure, you will measure your sugar levels, you will measure your heartbeat. Those are your vitals. These determine whether you are fit and functional. Now, the economic vitals of the country are not functioning. What are the economic vitals? We look at the exchange rate. Gone, kaput. The exchange rate before Wednesday was US $1 to 40,000. By Friday, because of the confusion and uncertainty around the introduction of the fictitious ZIG, it had lowered to US 1 to 30,000. But January to March, the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed by 800%. That's a complete disaster, an unprecedented, disaster. I wish I could time to go and PhD to do a PhD just on this unprecedented phenomenon. That's vital number one, the exchange rate. Vital number two is the inflation. Now, the good thing about the inflation is that it doesn't lie. You can rig the election at Harare. You can beat up your citizen and pauperize them to inertia that they can't even breathe, they can't even say amen tarwadziwa. But you can't rig the supermarket. Inflation right now is around 1,500% in real terms. Their own rigged election, remember we moved from blended to geometric inflation, is over 50-60% per month. So we are moving into the territory of hyperinflation. That's an economic vital. That's an economic vital. The third vital is the social services, the social indicators. So you look at things like maternal mortality rates, you look at things like infant mortality rates. If you have what we are now having, that 8 infants are dying out of 1,000, that 60 mothers are dying out of 1,000, and the life expectancy is back to the region of 38, you have got a disaster. You know the true state of what is happening in our schools. The number of children that have dropped. I was in court recently doing a case on teenage pregnancies and teenage abortions in Zimbabwe. There are 6 abortions that are taking place illegally in Zimbabwe every hour. That must tell you that, every day. That must tell you that we've got a complete, dislocation. Social indices, the number of people that have to be fed. Over 7 million people need to be fed by August of this year. That's more than 50% of the population, because our population is around 13 million. Then you come to employment. Employment is a major indicator, is a major vital. Over 95% of our people are in the informal sector. A tiny percentage of our people are in the informal sector. That's a vital. Another vital, your debt sustainability and your debt level. Musoro weZimbabwe wakazvimba ngezvikwereti. Our debt to GDP ratio is over 120%. So we've broken all the thresholds. That's why the IMF is here, because this government is trying to negotiate a staff monitored program, which is an entry point in a debt renegotiation exercise. Before the election, they were talking much about debt renegotiation. You saw Adesina here, the president of the African Development Bank. You saw President Chisano here, but they stole an election. No one is interested. Everyone is written off Zimbabwe. So the bottom line of what I'm saying, Dara Blessed, is that the economy doesn't lie. You look at vitals, our economic vitals. We are on life support in the intensive care unit at Paranyatwa Hospital.
So the IMF believes that the government is doing enough to address these vitals, because in its statement it says this: the mission welcomes the authorities' strong resolve to address the sources of fiscal pressures. And the governor in his statement put a strong statement that he will not print money, he will not raid nostro accounts, because he does not believe in stealing people's property. Now, these measures, aren't they sufficient?
They're artificial, Dara. You know what they did last year? What they did last year, when the exchange rate imploded And when inflation imploded, they physically controlled money supply. Money supply had shot by over 300%. So what they did was they stopped paying contractors. They stopped paying service providers. And you recall that there was some, on the face of it, modicum of some stability. But we said at the time that you don't control diarrhea by stitching up yourself or by starving yourself. And we said at the time that once the taps open, there will be an implosion. Taps opened up in November of last year. And when the taps opened, but they started paying out people, they had to pay bonuses, they had to pay debts, and they're drowning in debts, because part of the thing that they've done is that they've transferred quasi-fiscal activities to the Ministry of Finance and quasi-fiscal obligations. In turn, they've also taken over, the Ministry of Finance has also taken over export surrender receipts from the Reserve Bank. So everything is now from the Reserve Bank to the Ministry of Finance to Treasury. So when John Part 2 says, I'm not involved, it's because he has to say that because he's naked. He's basically a branch manager. He has nothing. They've taken away, remember what they've done to him? They've taken away export surrender requirements. They've taken away the debt. They've also taken away fidelity. They've put it to Mtapa, to John 1. They've taken away Orex and put it to Mtapa, to John 1. So John 1 has ensured that John 2 is naked. So John 2 is a clerk. John 2 is a branch manager. He knows something about branch managing because he's a banker. So when John Part 2 says, I will not and I don't believe in quasi-fiscal activities, it won't happen under my watch, because he is naked. He actually absolutely has nothing. But I come to the economy. So the IMF naively can say, no, they're doing well, but let's have a long-term perspective. We are now in April of 2024. What has happened in 2024 is we now have a new currency. That is a fiction. That is going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons. We have got the world's highest rate of inflation right now. We've exceeded Venezuela. We now have one of the weakest exchange rates in the region, worse off than countries that are at war, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, and so forth. That's the balance sheet of Zimbabwe. So if you want to know truly what the IMF would say, wait for their Article 4 report, because it's a complete diagnosis. Don't read a few lines to me, because I don't need the World Bank or the IMF to unpack this economy. This economy is a mess. This economy is a dog's breakfast, but one which not many dogs would want to have anything to do with.
So there's been a lot of buzz and discussion that we need to support this local currency. We need to have, as Zimbabweans, have confidence in it and stop politicizing this issue around the new currency. Because the moment we don't have confidence in our own money, that money will not have value. What is your reaction to that?
I think they take us for a ride. They take us for granted. I need to know, and the ordinary average person needs to know, what is it that motivated? What is it that motivated the transition from the Zimbabwean dollar to ZiG? What is the mischief that ZiG is intended to address, which could not have been addressed by the Zimbabwean dollar? It eludes my wisdom, because there's none. If it's about the currency being bagged, the Zimbabwean dollar should have been bagged. You need import cover. So what is it? It's about vanity, so that someone puts his signature on a new currency and say John Part 2, or a president can go and say, I introduced my currency, the Zim dollar was Mugabe's. Now I only now have my own ZIG, whatever that means. So from a purely technical point of view, from a purely scientific point of view, I don't see anything rational that justified the abandonment of the RTGS dollar to ZIG. Now, if you create your mess and your vanity, don't expect us to support that. We will not do that. However, the more fundamental issue is this. We are where we are because of complete mismanagement of our economy, which is reflected. The immediate proof of economic mismanagement are two things: the exchange rate and inflation. At independence in 1980, the Zimbabwean dollar that we inherited was stronger than the US dollar. The US dollar was like 60 cents to our own currency. Our own currency was 1-on-1 with the British pound. But through economic mismanagement, through living beyond our means, we bastardized that currency. We bastardized the Zimbabwean dollar. In October of 1997, we made huge unbudgeted payments to war veterans. On one Friday alone, Black Friday, the 14th of November 1997, our currency collapsed by 70%. Since then, we've never recovered. We've now gone through currencies like diapers. So Zimbabwean dollar, traveler's check, a bearer check, a bond note, RTGS dollar, Zimbabwean dollar. In between, we've had variations of currencies, the Eco Cash, a Zipiti, the whatever. So in a space of 15 years, we've introduced 7-8 currencies. That's unheard of, that's unprecedented. And the worst thing we did, Dara, is to actually bastardize the US dollar itself. The value of the US dollar in Zimbabwe has got a different value than Ghana, than Malawi, than Zambia. We have bastardized the same. The price of goods in US dollars in Zimbabwe is much, much, much more than in South Africa, in Zambia or Namibia. So we have our own US dollar. There is a global US dollar. We've got our own US dollar because we've bastardized it. And the problem is simple. We can't manage this economy. ZANU can't manage this economy. So it can change ministers of finance, it can change Reserve Bank governors, it can change currencies. It won't work, it can't work. That is why people have no confidence in Zimbabwe. A currency is a byproduct of confidence, 60%. A currency is a byproduct of the social contract. They believe that this president can actually make a difference in my life. This finance minister can actually make a difference in my life. This Reserve Bank governor can actually make a difference in my life. Unfortunately, there is zero confidence in Mr. Mnangagwa. There is zero confidence in Mr. Mtolis Ngube. There is zero confidence in Mr. George Goamatanga. John Mushayavanu is too new, I'll leave him, but he's my friend. He has inherited poison chalice. If I were him, I would have remained at FBC playing golf at Royal Harare.
But you speak about a big problem that we have, something that is endemic in our society, that you say that we bastardize the value of the United States dollars.
Correct.
And this is normally around profiteering and also political mischief, which you have been blamed on as a politician yourself and as opposition leaders, that you are the ones who are responsible, chiefly responsible for ensuring that people disobey their government. Business people are actually looking to push regime change agenda by manipulating prices and manipulating the economy so that you prove that ZANU-PF is not competent.
It's fiction, Dara. ZANU-PF blames everyone except it will blame sanctions. it will blame the opposition, but not itself. The buck starts and ends with ZANU-PF. The buck starts and ends with Robert Mugabe. The buck starts and ends with the Shek building in Rotondo. They must accept full responsibility of the mismanagement of this economy. I bleed Dara when I go to places like Zambia, when I go to places like Kenya. We used to be way ahead of those countries. We used to be way ahead of these countries. I've said in a meeting recently that independence in 1980, Kenya's GDP was $7 billion. Zimbabwe's GDP was $7 billion. Now Kenya is a $264 billion economy. We're a $25 billion economy. So we have scored on goals. We have suffered from self-induced policy distortions. We have refused to be democratic. It is not an accident that that countries that are successful have gone through political renewal, have gone through political change. South Africa attained democratic rule very recently, 25-30 years ago. It has had 4 presidents: Zuma, Mbeki, Mandela, Motlanthe. In May, it is going to have another election. Take Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, Chiluba, Rupia Banda, my friend President Manawasa, President HH. We are stuck with 2 presidents, Emerson and Robert. Without the power of the state to renew itself, its economy will not renew itself. Its politics will not renew itself. Its economy will not. So Zimbabwe is trapped in a time frame. It's like someone pressed the freeze button and ran away with the remote control. Which is why when you drive in our roads, in Chendambuya, the road is like it was built in 1932. If you go to growth points like Murewa, like whatever, they're like something out of a horror movie captured in colonial Rhodesia in 1951. So we have remained trapped in a time warp because of a selfish liberation movement that operates on the doctrine of entitlement, the doctrine of impunity, and zero-sum game. If I can't have it, no one else can have it. A liberation movement that is still fighting a war that finished 45 years ago in 1979. That's the price we are paying. It's a political problem.
Some people have then also argued that ZANU-PF and the ruling government at the moment is doing as it pleases because there is no opposition. You've failed to put an alternative. What is your view on that?
There are 2 sides of the coin. You don't need to do right. You just have to do right. So whether or not there's an opposition, surely it's wrong to steal. There's massive corruption in this country. Surely it's wrong to mismanage the economy. Surely it's wrong to have high inflation. As for the opposition, I'm here to speak about economics, but the people of Zimbabwe should put their house in order and confront ZANU-PF. We can't go on like this. We have to put our house in order. To give future generations a chance. We can't have a country where more than 4 million people are living in the diaspora. We can't have a country where the longest queue in that country is the queue to the passport office because everyone is trying to live. We can't have a country where 73% of its professionals, its top doctors, its top scientists are scattered all over the world. Something is not right. We have to make Zimbabwe right. We are patriots. We love this country. But there is a problem. And the elephant in the living room is politics. The elephant in the living room is ZANU-PF. We have to confront it. And the Constitution allows us to confront it peacefully and constitutionally in Section 59.
But let us be fair here, Honorable Biti. When you say Zimbabweans need to put their house in order, what exactly do you mean that they need to put their house in order?
Look, if I come to your house and I destroy the Jura wall, you've got a duty to to protect your house. So we as Zimbabweans have a duty to protect our dignity. We have a duty to protect our mental sanity. We have a duty to protect our livelihoods. So we have identified the problem. The problem is ZANU-PF. So we have a duty to protect our livelihoods, our dignity, and our sanity.
And the people would argue that they put their house in order because, as you were responding, you said an election was stolen, and coming to this space that we now have ZIG, an election had been stolen. That's what you said, and those who had come to assist Zimbabwe have all gone. Now, the people of Zimbabwe will argue that they supported the leadership of the CCC, which you are part of, and they believe that they played their part. You let them down.
Look, I think that the demarcation between the people and their organizations shouldn't be met. We are as good as the organizations that we have, and we are all in it together. And we must not, and I think this has been a fundamental problem with our politics. We must not outsource our struggle to you. We must not do that. There are two things that, in my view, are needed yesterday. It is agency, agency. We have to be our own liberators, as Bob Marley, once sang. We have to be the active ingredient in the process of change that we deserve. During the liberation struggle, every person had an agency between those in division of labor, between those that went in the bush and actually carried guns, and those that remained providing support, providing assistance, cooking, and so forth. So I don't see enough of the agency. I see a lot of delegation of responsibility to a few individuals. I see outsourcing. It doesn't work like that. We have to have the agency collectively. Secondly, I don't see the urgency, urgency. So I don't see urgency and agency. It's missing. We have normalized the abnormal. We accept madness. They come up with a new currency. It's business as usual. They come up with a mad budget. It's business as usual. They distribute vehicles and confetti, stolen theft. It's business as usual. They speak of a third term. It's business as usual. It's not good enough. So I don't see agency. I don't see urgency. Collectively, I don't want to speak about political parties or individuals. I want to speak about our collective responsibility as citizens. We must provide the agency and the urgency.
But being fair again, Honorable Biti, during the Liberation War struggle, people had the urgency and agency that you speak about, but they had a vehicle that was pushing it, a certain place where your agency is put together, right? Because we can't say that for a car, we all know that for a car to move, each and every part has to play its role. But then there must be a car. There must be that vehicle. The fuel will be put in, the oil will be put in. In this instance, the CCC was the vehicle. And you have left it, right now, people don't even know what is what or who is who in the opposition. And their agency, therefore, is left to ZANU-PF that appears organized. Is that not a fair assessment?
Yeah, look, does the average Zimbabwean actually believe in the imperative of change? Does he or she actually believe in the obligation of change? Do we have the same zeal and excitement for change as we had, let's say, in 2000? Because that is the glue that must bind us together. During the liberation struggle, certainly amongst the black people, overwhelmingly, there was an inevitable, unquenchable desire for an independent black state anchored on one man, one vote. The belief that a black government would liberate me. That theme and philosophy and polity was universal. I've got a feeling that we had that in 1999, 2000. It was embarrassing to be ZANU-PF. I'm not sure now that I see the universality of the importance of change. I'm not quite sure that I see the same almost religious belief in the imperator of change. I see, so from that ideological, philosophical basis, I see a lot of bastardization. I see challenge on our value system. ZANU has done so well in creating artificial diversions, false heroes, false prophets, false value systems. So it's now fashionable in Zimbabwe to be seen driving a Mercedes-Benz which you have never worked for, or to beg another person for a Mercedes-Benz instead of going to school and get a degree and work for yourself. So I think that we need to reset. We need to reset. It's much more. The problem is much more than political parties and organizations and leaders. There's something in the base that we need to revisit, which is much more fundamental, much more nuanced than the debate around political parties and leaders. I think we need to go deeper. We need to go deeper.
But what is your role in making sure that this happens? Because you're a political leader, right?
As an individual, I occupy spaces. I'm a lawyer. I've been doing what I've been doing in the courts with my strategic litigation. I'm busy writing. I think we're going to produce a book before the end of the year on unpacking liberation movements and so forth. But as an individual, I'm also entitled to rest, to have a sabbatical and so forth. So I'm in that mode. I'm in that mode of complete, I don't want to say isolation, complete timeout, if you like. But I still remain driven, Dara, by the fact that we have to have democratic change in Zimbabwe. It's unfinished business. And I wish that every Zimbabwean shares the strong desire that I have to see a democratic, prosperous, equal, transparent, just Zimbabwe. We deserve better than ZANU-PF.
But you've taken time out from your position as vice president of the CCC.
I don't want to go into from everything. From everything.
How do you do that when you're elected? I mean, just recently we saw a video of you saying you're elected at Congress, you are president of the CCC and you're not going anywhere. Now you have just, how do you let go of position that was bestowed to you at a Congress, just like that?
Everyone has got a constitutional right of controlling his or her affairs. At the present moment in time, as Tendai Biti, I've taken time out in certain spaces, including the political space.
But recently you also attended a meeting in Bulawayo, right, where you agreed on being rotational presidents. Right now, the president of the party is Washington Ngube. Does he know that you have dumped him?
I'm not sure about the meeting you're referring to.
I think just about 3 weeks ago, Jacob Mafume announced that there was a meeting in Bulawayo.
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of
No, I'm
that?
not aware of that.
So if those that the people look up to, because when you're in parliament, people looked up to you to raise issues on their behalf. When you were running Secretary General of the MDC, became vice president of the Triple C, of the MDC Alliance, and then the Triple C. And when you spoke at rallies, you galvanized people. You gave them impetus to have that agency and urgency. And now, when you, the leaders, take a back seat, who is supposed to give that vision?
I said very clearly, that the quest for democratic change remains an imperative in my life, and I'll die fighting for that change. And I'm quite sure that by the time I die, there will be democratic change in Zimbabwe. But at the present moment, I've taken a strategic retreat from the political space as Tendai Biti. I will be back. I don't know when, but I certainly will be back before 2028.
Mm-hmm. And let us look at the movement forward, Honorable Biti, especially because this conversation was mainly centered on the economy.
That's what I preferred. But
it's problematic, is it, in Zimbabwe to just talk about the economy and leave the politics outside?
Look, I've already answered what I can on the politics.
Mm. Yeah. So let us talk.
And I think the point I've tried to emphasize is that there has to be agency and urgency of Zimbabweans. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that. I see a lot of political parties during the ballot time. I don't see those parties now. I wouldn't care if there were a million parties. I wouldn't care. We must just be alive. We must just fight back. Regrettably, I don't see us doing that at the present moment.
Mm. What can help us as a nation to build confidence? The 60% that you're talking about, the confidence in the currency. If, for instance, you were to sit down with John Mshaya Doc, who you say is your friend, to advise him on this economy?
I think the real challenge is with his boss, not with him. He has a very limited mandate in terms of Section 6 of the Reserve Bank Act. His functions are just three: bank supervision, running the national payment system, and running the exchange rate. So on the exchange rate, he has inherited something that he found in the pipeline already. It's not his. But I'm quite sure that if he had been allowed to implement his own ideas, I think he would have stuck with the Zimbabwean dollar. He would have scrapped export surrender requirements. He would have scrapped, as he in fact has done, the auction system. The auction system was toxic. I also think that he would have allowed the floating of the Zimbabwean dollar so that it finds its natural resting, place, so that market forces allow the opportunity to set the true value, and that there's proper price discovery using the market. However, he has walked into a trap. And the trap he has walked in is the myth and belief that we can actually have a bullion-backed currency, a currency backed by other money. Gold is other money. He has 1.1 tons. He was speaking about the production of 35 tons of gold. It's not as if that gold will come to the Reserve Bank for free. It will cost a lot of money, which this government does not have. But to me, it's absurd that you spend money, US dollars, to buy gold, to back a currency, which is why the world over moved away from gold-backed currencies in the 70s. What now backs currencies is confidence, number one. There has to be confidence. What now backs currencies is the economy, the strength of your economy, the infrastructure in that economy. So if you go to South Africa, for instance, it's a $500 billion economy. You have no doubt that this country can sustain a currency. Yes, the rand is volatile, but you have no doubt that this is a sustainable economy. Just look at the state of the infrastructure. Just look at the state of the roads and so forth. Now, if you drive from here to Mutavatava, you drive from here on the Harare Nyamapanda road, you drive from Bulawayo to Victoria Falls, you drive from Harare to Churundu border post, you drive from here to Mount Darwin. The state of the infrastructure alone tells you that this is a country that can't sustain a currency. It's a collapsed country. It's a failed state. You spend a day in Zimbabwe, 3/4 you don't have lights. You don't have electricity. If you are unlucky to fall sick, you go to Parenyatwa or Harare hospital, which can't even dispense a painkiller, which can't even dispense a paracetamol. That's the true state of our country. So in that environment, to sustain a currency will be very difficult. But you then go to our history, our legacy. The legacy we have is that through a crisis of over-accumulation, we bastardized a currency. The last time we printed a Zimbabwean dollar, it was a $100 trillion note, which couldn't buy you 2 bottles of soda. The people rejected that currency in 2007, 2008. Now, what happens is that when a currency is rejected, is the ultimate expression, is the ultimate vote of no confidence in a currency. And so when that happens, it's impossible to introduce your currency. There's no country in the world which has involuntarily dollarized as we did, which has been able to use its own currency again. You can create your currency and use it as change. That is possible. You can create your currency, use it as change. The Argentinians have been doing it for a long time, but you cannot have your own currency. It doesn't happen, and it won't happen. So these games with currencies, you move from RTGS to ZIG to bond notes to bearer checks it's an absolute circus. It's an absolute a joke, but it reflects a structural myopia, structural illiteracy, structural cluelessness. Because any person with a basic understanding of economics and political economy knows that you can't play around with currencies without the basics being in place. What are the basics? It's political confidence. It's political hygiene. What are the basic? It's economic hygiene, sound macroeconomic management. Now, if you are like the Zimbabwean government that operates on deficit, you have a problem. You can't run that economy. Then number 3, if you have got long hands and you're corrupt, and this country is corrupt, you can't run an economy. You can't run a country. And that is where we are. That is our balance sheet, a sad balance sheet.
What do you think will happen of the ZIG when it starts circulating? I mean, it starts circulating. It starts circulating digitally, but physically, it's expected to start circulating on April the 30th.
Look, I think the 4th Street is off today. Probably off until the end of April. They'll be studying this currency. The official exchange rate, it has been placed at 1:13. I see even Zinara now has toll gates being paid in ZIG, I think about 58. But once there's clarity on the index rate, Remember, when SI 33 of 2019 was introduced, the index was 1:1, then 1:2.1, but in no time at all, it will shoot and balloon. The biggest institution that will undermine ZIG is the government itself. Because number one, fuel will continue being levied in US dollar terms. Passports and government fees, including toll gates themselves, including license fees like number plates and so forth, licenses to ZBC, will continue being paid in US dollars. And the government can't afford any other alternative except the use of ZIG. And to the extent that the government itself will not and does not have confidence in its own currency, 4th Street will be watching. But remember, Dara, there are already institutional pressures on this currency. There are already institutional pressures on this currency. This currency is designed to fall. This currency is designed to collapse because the pressures that brought down the bond note, that brought down the original Zimbabwean dollar, that brought down the RTGS dollar, that brought down the new Zimbabwean dollar that they buried on Friday through structural instrument 60 of 2024 will remain. What are those pressures? Fiscal indiscipline and lack of fiscal consolidation at the Ministry of Finance. Pressure number one. So they have to print money. Pressure number two is our huge appetite for imports. Our huge appetite for imports. We have to import things. And some of them we have no choice. We don't produce oil in this country, hydrocarbons. That's about 1.5 billion US dollars. That has to go. We are not producing enough electricity. We have to import between 300 to 600 megawatts per month. That means that 200 million US dollars has to go to electricity. We need drugs in our hospitals. We don't produce life-saving drugs that our hospital needs. These are traditional and fair imports. But we like trinkets and junkets. We are spending over $1 billion US dollars on motor vehicles. We are spending around $300 million on soft life, on champagne, on alcohol, on perfumes, and so forth. Go to Sam Levy and you see the trinkets.
I feel attacked.
I don't think you stay in Borodale.
The alcohol.
Alcohol. Oh, I know you love it. You see, your thing, your Jamesons, they cost a lot of money. And the country is spending around US $300 million on soft life. So the pressures, the import pressures are huge, which will put tremendous pressure on the ZIG. So ZIG is dead before it's born. It's gone. It's kaput. Which is why there was no point in transiting from the RTGS dollar to ZIG. There was no point at all except vanity. I want my signature on the currency. They're even delaying it because the old notes, which were ready, by the way, had Mangundla's signature. John Part 2 also wants his signature. You can't blame him because at least he will show his grandchildren that, look, here's my signature. And the president also wants to say, I've got my own currency. Here's my ZIG. So it's a game of vanity.
I mean, would you, at your law firm, accept ZIG payments?
Of course, it's the legal tender of the country. We have no choice. The law demands that we accept ZIGs. But if I were to give you a lift in my own car, and if I were to charge you, I won't accept ZIG. I would just say, travel for nothing. But business, we have no choice.
Amazing. I mean, there's been an argument, Honorable Biti, that when you were finance minister, this economy did not produce jobs. This economy, because it didn't have its own monetary policy, was stagnant and was dying. I think you need to address this.
Those are revisionist positions. The true state of the matter is that when we came into government, it was dead. Teachers had gone away. Everything was dead. So we resuscitated everything. We brought back teachers. We brought back the functionality of the public service. When I came in, capacity utilization was 4%. By the time I left, it was 80% and 100% in some sectors. In real terms, and they revised the figures, in real terms, the economy grew by an average of 13%. That's a miracle. And you see, with the economy, it doesn't like. People will tell you, go out there, people will tell you because they lived the benefits of a stabilized economy that was not bastardized by stealing, by printing of money, by fiscal ill discipline, and by self-induced policy distortions. The economy grew in real terms. There was employment in real terms, and we knew the direction. We knew that the US dollar was never going to be a permanent currency, and that's why discussions had already started in SADC about the establishment of a monetary union, a SADC monetary union, so that the region would have its own currency, and the decimation of borders in the region. That agenda is necessary because only true regional integration will save Zimbabwe, will save the SADC region. But in fact, it has to be continental integration, which is why I'm very excited by Africa's the ACTFA, the attempt to have a customs and free trade area. That must translate to a monetary union. But unfortunately, that dream will not happen because you have little tin pots, little despots, little dictators, which can't allow the opening of borders. Because once you have a monetary union, you have to have both fiscal and monetary convergence. So it means your rate of inflation must more or less be the same. Your growth rate must more or less be the same. The exchange rate will be the same. But when you have those standards, you also must have converged political polity. That means that you must have free and fair elections in those countries and so forth. So little tin pots like Angola, like Zimbabwe, like Mozambique, I can't see them allowing that. Notwithstanding tin pots in West Africa, I can't see Mali accepting that. I can't see Paul Biya of Cameroon. It's been in power since 1981. I can see Obiang in Equatorial Guinea. He's been in power since 1979. I can see Eyadema Nansibe of Togo accepting that, since him and his father have been in power since 1964 in Togo. So politics, like it is a hindrance in Zimbabwe, politics is going to be a hindrance to regional integration, is going to be a hindrance to African integration.
I just want to find out from you, how do you manage to keep these figures, exact dates in your head, and exact, figures of the money in your head, just like that?
People must read, Dara. People must read. There's no substitute for reading. The brain is a sponge. So if you stretch it, it can absorb unbelievable data. So people should read. People should read.
But people read, but you are different. You would know the exact date when the exact day on Black Friday. You would know the exact statutory instrument number and the date it was promulgated, you would actually know the exact figures to the dot of inflation 5-6 years ago. I've forgotten the inflation 6 months ago because it's just running away.
People should read Dara. The brain is very elastic. So stretch it, stretch it. When I was very young, I did a case with Advocate Chris Anderson. May his soul rest in peace. So you may know the case, Febachidarikire. Many years ago, Febachidarikire was charged with murder. So we briefed Chris Anderson. So the record was huge like this, thousands and thousands of pages. But the guy was not writing; he was just sitting there, and he knew every page 700, page 3,000, page what, and so forth. And I learned from him the inelasticity, the elasticity of the brain. It's a sponge; it can absorb information, but there's no substitute for reading. There's no substitute for reading. People must read.
Amazing. I want to thank you very much, Honorable Biti, for joining me on the Free Talk. But before I let you go, Honorable Biti, maybe just talk to the people of Zimbabwe from your heart, a message from your heart that you'd want to deliver to Zimbabwe, to Zimbabweans. And also, maybe if I could ask you, what advice would you, if you sit with President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, just the two of you, what advice would you give him, except maybe to step down?
My message to President Mnangagwa will be, please, I beg you, keep away from the idea, the temptation, the seduction of a third term. Keep away from it. It will plunge this country into chaos, and you absolutely don't need it. You've been in government since 1980. So if you don't have a legacy, you'll never have a legacy in another 5 years. If you don't have inheritance, you'll never have it in another extra 5 years. So I beg you, don't lacerate the constitution. Don't put Zimbabweans in a situation where Zimbabwe can implode because of the seduction and temptation of a third term. I know that people around you, people in your courtyard, possibly your children, they might be tempted by that. It's dangerous. It's unnecessary. It's a disaster for our country. For the ordinary working people of Zimbabwe, we have toiled for a long time. The children of Israel spent 40 years in the bush, in the desert. We have spent 44 years. We need salvation, but we need action. We need action. We have to reorganize ourselves. We have to reset. We have to understand the common good, the common vision. And the common vision is to have a democratic, green, solid, prosperous, just and equal Zimbabwe, which has jobs, which has functioning hospitals, which has functioning schools. And that requires all hands on deck. It requires a purity of belief, purity of the struggle. It requires sacrifice. And as I said before, it requires agency and urgency.
I want to thank you very much, Honorable Biti, for joining me on the Free Talk. This is the platform for ideas, a platform for conversation where Zimbabweans have to listen to each other, talk to each other, and not talk through each other. Now, from the history of Gideon Gono, John Mangujiga, doctor, John Mshayavanu, doctor, Zimbabwe has gone through an array of currencies. The US, bond note, bearers check. Now we are doing the zig. And many are calling it the zigzag after the zigzag band. There is no clear path, no straight line to a better future for our children and their children. There is no clear path for the success of Zimbabwe. Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube said that this economy is ticking all the correct boxes, and we are on the 10. But the pockets of the people are speaking differently. What is needed is to converge these two to a point where dreams can be made in this country, where those who are going to college, to school, who are studying their craft can be given an opportunity to build a decent life outside corruption. And this can only happen if our leaders begin to walk the strict and straight path, stay away from corruption, stop overspending, and do for the people of Zimbabwe what they can't do for themselves, instead of doing what the people of Zimbabwe don't want done. This is Darabi. As usual, this is the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom. Thank you very much to my guest, Honorable Biti.
Thank you, Dada. Thank you.